Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really good beers from these guys in the past, but it has been a very long time since I reviewed anything from them. I think it was about 2016 or so that I last reviewed a beer from these guys, and I think the main reason for that was that I reviewed a lot of the beers that they did in quite quick succession and then I didn't really see anything new from them for quite a little while. But yeah, definitely going to be nice to return to them after quite some time, and fingers crossed this is another good beer. These guys were actually the first microbrewery to open up in Scotland, and they've always done some really quite nice traditional ales. So curious to see what this one has in store for us. So for this review then, we are going to head to Biggar, which is right in the heart of the Scottish borders. Pretty much if you go west from Edinburgh and east from Glasgow and meet in the middle and head directly south, you'll find Biggar down there. Very beautiful part of the country incidentally if you want to go for a wee drive about. But we're going to have a look at another beer from Broughton Ales, or Broughton Brewery as they've been known as well. I'm not sure what the correct way is actually to refer to this brewery, if it is Broughton Brewery or Broughton Ales, but I think both work in fairness. But yeah, this beer is simply called Double IPA. It comes in at 7.5% ABV. I'm pretty sure you know what style it is, but this is another beer that I bought from my local Lidl shop. So yeah, I just went in and saw it and I was like, need to have a go at this and see how we get on with it. So yeah, definitely cool to return to these guys after quite some time. They've got some really nice beers. Probably their iconic beer would be the Old Jock. So yeah, that is one that I would always recommend for people who are interested in the kind of traditional Scotch ales, if you like. The Old Jock is a little bit of a cult classic. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Definitely curious to see how it turns out, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. 7.5% double IPA, this one. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Broughton Brewery, Broughton Ales before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite a bit at the moment because I am enjoying a little bit of time at home in the motherland, and I will be back in September, so maybe we can get some more Broughton things reviewed at that point. But yeah, that would be quite cool. But as always, do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Broughton Brewery, Broughton Ales then, on to my brewery notes. So Broughton Brewery was founded back in 1979 by David Younger and James Collins, and it was based in a former abattoir in the small village of Biggar, right in the heart of the Scottish borders. And as I said to you, Broughton Ales is regarded as the first Scottish microbrewery. But Collins and Younger released their first beer, which was the Green Mantle Ale, to great success, and the brewery became well known throughout the country because of this. The beer was actually so popular that locals soon began to refer to it as the Green Mantle Brewery rather than Broughton Ales. But the Green Mantle Ale is actually considered a little bit of a kind of cult classic among Scottish craft beer drinkers, and my dad remembers when that beer was released. Actually, that was always one that he used to have a go of every so often. But the Green Mantle Ale really helped increase the demand overall for small batch brewed beers in Scotland, and gradually Broughton Brewery introduced the Old Jock Ale, which is still a cult classic today, the Merlin's Ale, and also the Black Douglas. And basically a lot of their beers originally were named after well-known characters from the Scottish borders. In 1995 though, the company actually went insolvent, and so it was bought over by Gillis Litchfield, or Giles Litchfield, I'm not sure exactly which way to pronounce that, but he introduced this moniker, Beers with Character, and this was when he introduced a series of 10 ales that he wanted to use to kind of increase the exports of the brewery, and they began doing this in 1996. And again, much of that was based on all the different characters and different people who were famous in the Borders region of Scotland, the Black Douglas, Merlin the Wizard, and so on. But yeah, in 2015, the brewery continued to expand over the next few years, but in 2015 there was another change in ownership. It was brought by John Hunt, Stephen McCartney and David McGowan, who all had held positions in various international drinks companies, and they've basically been increasing the brewery's capacity and things over the last few years, and they've also been working on putting a visitor site into the brewery, which I think is up and running at the moment. But recently they've undergone a major rebranding, and so they now have two ranges of beer, the Hoppo and the Jock, and I think sadly they've actually dropped a lot of the historic beers that they had. I really think if that is the case, I think that's a real shame, to be honest with you. If you're going to, they've got these two ranges, and I can understand building new ranges and things, but I think they maybe need to add a third range to that called the Borders range, and put the Black Douglas in that, put the Green Mantle, because it's, that's the first Scottish craft beer. That for me, that's just a bit heartbreaking almost, that beer is not available anymore. Obviously they're looking at sales figures and stuff, but not to even do it as like a seasonal or something like that, I think that's a little bit of a shame. But put the Green Mantle in either the call it historic or call it the Border series. The Green Mantle, the Black Douglas, and the Merlin Ale. Those are the classics of. Those are some of the classics of Scottish craft beer, so it's just a shame to see those no longer in production. And that's, as I understand, those beers are not brewed anymore. It is all the Hoppo and the different jocks that they've done. I need to try those right enough, and I'm not going to say anything about those beers, but I do think it's a terrible shame if they've completely dropped beers like the Black Douglas, the Green Mantle, and the Merlin's Ale, because those were really nice. The Black Douglas was a really nice, very dark ale actually. I very much enjoyed that one. I remember when I reviewed it. My little son is named after the Black Douglas, of course, so that would have been quite cool to go and film a little review at the at the Douglas Larder in the town of Douglas down there with. That would definitely be something that I would want to do. So yeah, fingers crossed. I really hope that Broughton Ales do bring back like a new series called the Historic series with all these older recipes that they did. I think that's a terrible shame if they've just dropped those completely. But we won't judge their new beer on the basis of that. We'll judge it as it stands, of course, but yeah, I think this one is a fairly recent addition to the range as well. And as of January 2021, when I am reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced 20 or so different beers according to Untappd. I would have thought it would have been quite a bit more than that. I thought it would have been nearer 30 or 40, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, not the most prolific of breweries, but they do tend to kind of tweak the recipes and stuff a little bit from what I understand. But yeah, my favourite beers that I've had from these guys probably would be the Black Douglas. I really like that one. The Santa Stout that they used to release at Christmas was always quite a nice one as well. The Old Jock is a little bit of a classic, and I do need to see if they still do the 6.2 IPA. That was one that was supposed to be pretty good, but I just never managed to try actually. So yeah, hopefully we can get a hold of a few more beers from these guys at some point. I know they've got the Wee Jock, the Stout Jock, and a couple of other things there, and they've also got their Hoppo beers that I need to have a look at as well. So fingers crossed we can get some of those reviewed for you at some point fairly soon on the channel, maybe in September or August when I'm home next time. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Broughton Brewery, Broughton Ales. As I say, it's Scotland's very first new generation, first member of the new generation of microbreweries, and they've done some pretty damn nice beers over the years. So have a go at the Old Jock. That's the one I'd recommend that you start with, and see where you go from there. I need to try some of those Hoppo beers though, because I've heard they actually are pretty nice. But yeah, that's all I can tell you about Broughton Ales for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork before we open up. So this one actually has the more kind of classic style of Broughton Ales artwork on it. I'll let you have a little quick look at this one, the Old Jock, which this is the more kind of modern style of artwork that they have. This is different to the one you have seen me reviewed a few years ago. I'm giving this beer to my Swedish teacher back in Sweden because he loves craft beer, and that has to go for him to have a try at. But yeah, this is the more kind of classic Broughton Ales sort of symbol, and there on the side you can see the Broughton Ales, the Broughton Brewery symbol actually. But yeah, that's also on the bottle cap. I don't think I have a Broughton Ales bottle cap like this one, of course, but it says on the side here, beer of character, brewed for maximum flavour using our vintage Porteous malt mill and traditional open fermentation. Our master brewer has created an intensely rich, hoppy and very quaffable beer, another classic from Scotland's original independent brewery. These guys have had the same brewmaster, incidentally, for about 30 years, and yeah, there's no breweries in Scotland that can really say that. So he joined them, back in about 1990. Or something like that. Feeling old now. But yeah, it says on the side here the malts in this one are pale ale and caramel, and it's got hops of Columbus and Chinook, which are quite classic bittering hops. Columbus gives you that lovely kind of spicy bitterness, that spicy floral aromaticity. Chinook is more of a kind of piney resinous thing. Pacific Jade, that's Australian, isn't it? Or is that New Zealand? I forget which country that one's from, but that gives you a lovely big orangey hit, I remember. And then you've got the classic Cascade from Yakima Valley, 8% alpha acid. over on the west coast of the States. But yeah, double IPA this one. I bought this beer at my local Lidl store, I think like $1.75 or something like that. So pretty good value for what it is. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see how this one turns out. I'm being careful with this bottle cap because I want to keep this one for my collection actually. So there we go, managed to get it off. Pretty intact, yes, happy with that, happy with that. So yeah, because that thing bends the bottle caps and I do like to keep them flat basically. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. This looks pretty damn nice, I have to say. Quite impressed with that. Yeah, definitely a more classic kind of West Coasty type IPA by the looks of it. And I think definitely filtered as well. So yeah, that looks pretty damn nice. But if it's caramel malt and it's pale malt in this one, I'm not surprised by the colour of it. So yeah, there we go. So yes, as you can see with this beer, it's poured a lovely kind of, that's actually quite a coppery colour. It's actually a kind of gingery coppery type colour, this beer. Not sure how well that's going to show up on the camera with maybe you can see if I move it over here, just with my red cover on the drum kit behind me. But yeah, this is a lovely kind of coppery coloured beer, this one. You've got a solid, about third finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawny, very lightly cream coloured head on this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, but as you can see, the beer is crystal clear. But yeah, a lovely kind of coppery tint to it. It looks like a very, very nice beer. So yeah, I really like how this one, I really like how this one goes together. And from my perspective, it looks very, very nice. Very much like a West Coast IPA. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on two things. One, the type of malt that you use, and two, the length of boil. An IPA like this usually would undergo a boil between 70 and 90 minutes, but the longer you boil the beer, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour out of them. So I suspect, just going from the colour of this one, if it's only caramel that's in here, it might well have undergone a little bit of a slightly longer boil, and I think they tend to boil the beer, boil the wort just a little bit longer if it's like a double IPA or something. But at 7.5%, this is by no means the strongest double IPA you're going to come across. This one is pretty much right on the border of what you could consider a double IPA. I would always say 7.5% or 8% is your border mark. I would probably be inclined to say 8% for an Imperial Stout, 7.5 for an IPA. So this is more like a traditional strength Imperial double IPA. But yeah, it certainly looks the part, this one. Lovely kind of West Coast looking double IPA, this one. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on. Nothing overly surprising about the appearance of this beer. So yeah, let's take a look at that aroma. Oh yeah, that's quite nice actually. So straight away with this beer, you get that nice, with the pale malty note in this one, you do get a nice little bit of that kind of Scottish graininess out of it. Scottish malt in this one all the way, I think. But yeah, you've got a nice kind of almost brown bready base to this one, like wholemealy, bread crusty, a little bit of a white bready character in this one. I really like how that goes together for me. The aroma of this beer, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah, the aroma of this beer, I think, goes together very, very nicely. So yeah, it's got a lovely big oily kind of caramelly note to it, on top of that nice bready base that it has. When you sugar the beer up, you start to get more of the brown sugars out of this one. So you've got a lovely big kind of sweet caramel in there. You can definitely smell the bread crusty notes, the kind of more grainy aspects of the bread crusty notes just pushing their way out of this beer as well, which I think is very, very nice. But yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think, is just pretty spot on. It is really a very traditional take. It's like almost like an English, it is almost like a kind of English leaning double IPA, this one for sure, with the kind of grainy base that it has. But yeah, sweet caramel in there, a little bit of a toasted brown sugar as well, and then definitely some more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things, and all of that sits on top of that kind of grainy, wholemealy, bready type thing that this beer has going on. Actually, I like how that, I do like how all of that goes together in this beer. The more that you smell of this beer, the more of the grains you get out of it, and it starts to feel a little bit more like an almost rye bread type vibe that's in there. But yeah, it smells quite boozy, this beer as well, I will say that. It does smell quite boozy. But yeah, I think this one's going to be quite interesting. On the hoppy side of things then, you get a little touch of earthiness out of this one, but there's quite a big green component to the beer. You've got a little bit of that, the kind of piney resinous depth from the Chinook. You've got a nice little bit of of kind of spicy floral aromaticity out of it from the Columbus, and yeah, that goes together really, really very nicely for me. The grassy notes in the beer, yeah, the grassy notes in the beer do have a little bit of zest to them, and they are quite bright actually. So yeah, you do get a little bit of that kind of brighter, zesty grassiness out of the beer, but the green component for me is mainly kind of big and floral, a bit of spiciness, like I said, some nice floral aromaticity underneath. And I do like how, as I say, I really do like how that goes together in this one. So thumbs up to Broughton Ales for the green side of things. This beer has a nice contrast, kind of grainy, bready malt base, bit of sweet caramel and brown sugars in there, some nice kind of green components in it as well. But yeah, I really like how this beer goes together in that sense. On the fruity side of things, you've got a lovely big kind of oily component to this beer as well. The fruits come across as big and juicy, and in some stages when you're further away from it they feel a little bit more juicy, but they've got a big oily component in there as well. So yeah, for me, this one, it's quite interesting. You definitely get that big oily orange which is coming from the Pacific Jade, but underneath that you're getting the kind of softer, almost figgy-like notes that you would expect of Cascade, and a bit of the stronger grapefruit as well. Chinook will contribute to that as well, in fairness. So yeah, good little bit of grapefruit for me in this one. It's got that kind of juicier figgy note from the Cascade, and it's also got a, how do you say, it's also got a little bit more of a kind of big oily, orangey Amarillo kind of thing in this one. So yeah, I do like how the beer goes together in that sense. It is like a very kind of classic, just West Coast. It's got a bit. It has the American West Coasty hoppiness and the big fruitiness that you would expect of the West Coast one, but the malt base is a little bit more kind of English IPA type, if you like. But it's a Scottish malt, so yeah, it's quite distinctive in that sense too. But yeah, I have to admit, I think I'm going to quite enjoy this one. You guys watching the channel know that I'm a sucker for these big IPAs, these big orangey leaning IPAs I should say. There's almost a little bit of a kind of like Sultana, you know, a little bit of Sultana kind of dried, very light dried apricot-y kind of thing out of it. So yeah, there is a wee bit of that going on with this beer as well that you'll notice too. But I mean, overall, the aroma of this one for me, very traditional, and I just think, you know, really solidly done in my mind. So big thumbs up to Broughton Ales, Broughton Brewery, for this beer in terms of the aroma. I think this one is going to be pretty good. So yeah, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. This one, pardon me, is simply called the Double IPA, 7.5% ABV from Broughton Ales, Broughton Brewery in Biggar down in the Scottish borders. Nice to return to these guys after such a long time. I had no idea that it had been so long since I'd reviewed one of their beers. But let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's solid, absolutely solid. I mean, one thing I'll say about these Broughton beers, you know, these guys, as the oldest craft brewery in Scotland, you know, you do expect these guys to lean towards that kind of traditional beer sort of thing. And you get that out of this beer, absolutely. You get that in the malt base and a bit of the bitterness and things, and you know, a few other elements. These beers are kind of traditional leaning, if you like. But I'll tell you something, this beer packs a hell of a bitter punch to it. This has a hell of a bitter punch to it. So well done to Broughton Ales. I think I'm actually drinking this one quite fresh, because I was in my local Lidl twice and I saw this the second time, and I was there within the space of about, you know, 5 or 6 days, because I was in getting ice cream. Love a bit of ice cream, of course. But yeah, this beer, I hadn't noticed it before, so I bought it. So I think it may well have just been newly delivered, and it's not going to be that long going from Biggar to Alloa, of course, but it says best before April of 2022, so I think this one, yeah, this has been bottled. They're not going to say to you to keep that in bottle for like 2 years or something like that. This is a fairly fresh bottle, absolutely. But yeah, this has got a big bitter kick to it, this one. That's crazy, that. And I'll tell you something, this beer could pass as being, if I blind tasted this, I'd probably think it was quite a bit more boozy than it actually is, to be honest with you. But it's quite a straight shooting malt base, remember, just pale malt and caramel. So yeah, and that kind of works for it. It's a very nicely crafted beer, this one, and that's what you get from Broughton. You don't get things that are, stupidly crazy New England IPAs or whatever. You're not going to get that from these guys at the moment. We'll see how they go. But you get solid beers like this one, actually, and for me, this is pretty nice. It's a very old school beer. It is very old school, both from the kind of perspective of it being a slightly traditionally leaning IPA on its malt base, but it's got that more kind of, even if you think about that, it's got the sort of, old school West Coast type bitterness to it. This is a very interesting one for me, but it gets a thumbs up. Definitely gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I like this beer. I do like this one, so yeah, well done to Broughton for this. Need to try the hoppos and things. I do need to have a go at some of their other beers, absolutely. Yeah. So, lovely stuff, I have to say. Yeah, so straight away with this beer then, let's break down the flavour for you. Straight away with this beer, you can feel a nice kind of brown, wholemeal, bready quality, just blanketing the middle of your tongue there. It does get a bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste, but as you move back onto that back third of your palate, you can feel it just thickens up a little bit, and on the back third of your palate, it's distinctly more kind of smooth, if that makes sense. But in fairness, you do get a little bit of dry, grainy bitterness at the very back of your palate too. But then yeah, as you move further forward, you feel it smoothening out. As you reach that border region between back third and middle third of your palate, it really drops off quite considerably. It just goes, drops down. But yeah, there's a real bitterness, real grainy kind of bitterness on that border region in there too. But yeah, as you move, how do you say it, as you move further forward into that middle third of your palate, the slightly thinner brown bready quality that's in there, you get the brown sugars just sitting on top of that. So in the very centre of your palate, you've got a big oily kind of sweet caramel there. It's almost got a little bit of a toasty element to it as well if you move just slightly out from that very centre. But then gradually, as you move towards the very edge of your palate there, it does develop a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing as well. So that's really an interesting thing to point out about this beer too, for sure. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together in its malt base, like I say, very straight shooting, really quite old school. As I say, the grainy side of this beer gives it a bit of an English vibe, but the malts are distinctly kind of Scottish. The graininess that you get in Scotland is quite different, and these guys have got their own kind of unique malt base from what I remember. I can't remember the last time I drank one of their beers, but I always remember them having a really distinctive graininess. It's like with Williams Brothers, they've got the same maltiness, that kind of malty vibe. You can always tell a Williams Brothers beer. If you've had enough of them over the years, you can always tell, even if it's a new recipe, you can always tell. And that's the thing with these Broughton beers as well. There is just a little bit of a kind of brown bready wholemeal graininess in these beers that just gives them away as being a Broughton beer. And I like that about them. I like that when breweries have got their own little nuances and things like that, and you get that out of this beer 100%. But yeah, you might get one or two, if you go to the front corners of your palate then just go diagonally back, you might get one or two little woody elements coming out of the beer for sure. So I like that about this one, absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely a wee touch of a woody element, but I think we've covered the malty base and all the detail that we need to in this. This is quite straight shooting, but it develops a real dryness and things as you go further into the aftertaste. But yeah, the Columbus in this is absolutely showing its head. So let's focus on the hoppy side of things. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in this beer, and as you move further forward, you can feel the deep pine resinous notes of the Chinook coming out, and then as you move further forward, you can still feel the piney resin notes there, but on top of that, you've got the nice big spicy floral aromaticity from the Chinook. But then round the front curve of the palate, you've just got a little bit of a lighter kind of grassiness there, and the grassiness feels as if it's a little bit more kind of cascade oriented. It's just a little bit lighter and brighter almost, and just has a wee bit of that almost kind of figgy vibe to it. But yeah, this is definitely one of the most bitter IPAs I think I've come across in quite a wee while. This is a proper take on the West Coast American beers for sure, but with a Scottish malt base. Lovely. The thing that the bitterness also indicates, for those of you that are process and ingredients nerds like me, this beer has a lot of early addition hops in it. If you add the hops earlier on into the wort boil, that's when you get most of the bitterness out of them. I mean, Chinook and Columbus, they're like 11, 12. I think Columbus is like 11, 12, and I think Chinook is like 14% alpha acid, something like that. So they have a hell of a lot of bitterness in them. But basically, as you go along the boil, if you add the hops earlier on, you get more bitterness out of them, and as you gradually kind of progress through the boil, you'll get more kind of flavour and aroma at the expense of that bitterness. So yeah, definitely the Chinook and the Columbus have been added as early addition hops in this one for sure. So yeah, it's quite interesting actually. Yeah, it's a lovely beer, that for sure. I really like how it all goes together. Yeah, the green side of the beer works really well. The kind of big bitterness that you have works well with that slightly more kind of grainy presence that the beer has. But yeah, on that front third of your palate, you've got a nice big kind of oily. You've got a nice big kind of oily element to the beer. If you go towards the back of it, there's a good little bit of a big grapefruity kind of darkness to it. That's the Chinook all the way. I think it's too strong to be the Cascade on its own, but as you move further forward from that, you do start to get those lighter, more mellow Cascade notes. It's got a little bit of an almost kind of red figgy kind of thing coming out of it as well, but as you reach that front half of that front third of your palate, it's a big oily kind of tangerine note that comes out of the beer for sure. So I really do like how that side of it goes together as well. Yeah, it's very nice in that sense, and as I say, that's the Pacific Jade. The Pacific Jade is giving you that big orangey character. If I was blind tasting this one, I probably would think it was Amarillo, to be honest with you. I wouldn't think of Pacific Jade as being a big orangey hop like that. But yeah, it really is a lovely beer, this one. It leaves a big bitter aftertaste, so it's a proper old school West Coaster, this one. Absolutely, this is one of the beers that will kind of knock you for six if you're used to these kind of hazy, juicy IPAs. This one for me is pretty damn good. I wish I'd got to try the 6.2. Was it called 6.2? The 6.2 IPA. I would have loved to have had a go at that one from these guys before they took it away. But yeah, this is absolutely solid. If you want a properly old school West Coast IPA, go no further than your local Lidl shop, and you'll get 2 or 3 of these, and that'll sort you out for an evening. Absolutely. Yeah, lovely beer, this one. Definitely very old school, as I've repeated a few times in this review. But yeah, let's move on to the mouthfeel then. I feel I'm repeating myself now. But yeah, mouthfeel wise, I would say top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Carbonation is quite smooth in this one. The beer overall is pretty oily. The IBUs in this beer have got to be like 80 at least. They're quite high, absolutely, because of the Columbus and the Chinook. So yeah, definitely quite a bit of that coming out of this beer for sure. Lovely big oily fruity notes, kind of grainy, slightly bitter, malty base, and then some nice oily qualities in there as well. So yeah, nice big oily sweetness, which I really quite like. But yeah, this beer gets a big thumbs up from me. I really like how everything pieces together. Actually, this one really just ticks the boxes for me, absolutely. So yeah, properly old school West Coast IPA, this one with a nice kind of grainy Scottish malt base. So yeah, go to your local Lidl store and pick up a few of these if you want something more kind of West Coasty actually. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. An awesome beer actually from Broughton. It really just, the orange, the West Coast IPA, the caramel and stuff, it just hits the spot for me, really hits the spot for me, this one. So yeah, I do hope I can try a few of their newer beers and see what they're like as well. But yeah, let's leave it at that. This one was simply called Double IPA, 7.5% Double IPA, definitely a West Coast Double IPA, this one from Broughton Brewery, Broughton Ales in Biggar in the Scottish borders. Really cool to return to these guys after such a long time. I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on this beer, and I've just realised now that I should have done this beer in my Broughton glass, because years ago they sent me a little tulip glass that actually had the Broughton Ales thing. Typical. I remember right at the end of the review that I've got one of those, and I know where it is as well. I just didn't think to use it. But yeah, let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Broughton Ales, and we will return to these guys the next time I'm home. I will see about getting some of their Hoppo beers to review for you here on the channel. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and until the next time, slàinte, skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Broughton Ales, have a go at the old Jock first, and then try some of the more modern stuff. That would be my tip for these guys. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys very soon.